I'm looking here and thinking, you know, Julie scooped me because she had that 5th grader, and we should have had a 3rd grader or something so that we could have had somebody competitive to talk about what's going on. But I'm just delighted that you're going to have the chance to hear both Matt and Sherry, and I'll tell you just a little about them, and then they can tell you whatever they want to add. But in the about 2005, 2006, we did some augmented reality work at Harvard that was really on the bleeding edge. I mean, we were connecting a pocket PC to a GPS device and trying to do augmented reality. It was really difficult technically. But we wanted to know early on just what the strengths and the limits were, and Matt was leader of the project and really central to what happened and terrific in moving us forward. And then, since then, he has continued to be a very valuable partner and thought leader for us, and you'll hear about how we're using software that he and his colleagues have developed as an authoring system. And shortly after that, Sherry Metcalf came and joined us at Harvard and was part of the River City curriculum project, and then a leader with our EcoMove project, and now you'll hear her talk about her work with EcoMobile. So I've found the secret to success, which is to surround yourself with smart young people and then look as if you know what you're doing. So Matt and Sherry, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. And as Chris said, my name is Matt Dunleavy. Did you want to push that slide and remind me about the survey, Chris? Or I'll remind you, do the survey. There's apparently $50 in it for you. As Chris said, my name is Matt Dunleavy. I'm a professor at Radford University in Southwestern Virginia. And I'm currently the director of the Radford Outdoor Augmented Reality Project. And for approximately the next 10 minutes, I'm going to share an overview of what we consider augmented reality, because there are different definitions out there depending upon your business and your objectives. So what is AR? What is augmented reality? To answer that, I'm going to show you a couple videos, the first of which was released by Hewlett-Packard in 2005-2006 timeframe, which really captured, from our perspective, what augmented reality was going to look like in 2010-2012 period. And I think it's actually still a relatively accurate depiction of what AR could be. Well, for a second, I was like, is that my video? Like, what's going on? This is not what I had planned.
Well, Matt, I'm sorry about your 10 minutes.
And thank you very much. Any questions? Yes. We good?
May I have your attention? May I have your attention? We have determined that the fire alarm in the building was due to a false alarm. It was due to a false alarm. There's no need to evacuate the building. Be advised it was a false alarm. We apologize for any inconvenience. Thank you.
Are we ready? All right, let's do this. So I'm not going to show the rest of the video. Basically, the interesting part of the video is a lot of what was futuristic and visionary in 2005, 2006 is actually either on market right now or coming to market very soon. So you saw a lot of location-based augmented reality in that. You saw vision-based and image recognition technology in that video. And what we're doing is leveraging a lot of those technologies to basically do what we do. Now let's look at a 2012 vision of what AR might look like in 3 to 8 years. And I'm only going to show a small clip of this, and I encourage you to go online and watch both of these videos because I think both of them hold a lot of great ideas. Something that's important to keep in mind with this video is whereas in Roku's Reward, the previous video, and most of what we've been talking about in this conference is delivered through the smartphone, in this vision of the future, the technology is actually superimposed on top of the contact lens of the gentleman in the video. So very much like a successor to the Project Glass or Google Glass project, this is a vision of how it might jump to the lens.
Excellent. Perfect. Good job. Excellent. Well done. Level complete.
And for those of you who've done core exercises, wouldn't that be awesome? That's better than the plank.
Welcome.
So you can see the entire environment is embedded and superimposed with digital information that is delivered in real time and context aware, as Peggy had mentioned in her speech. You'll also notice the blending of AR with another phenomenon that's coming in all of our lives right now is what? What is this right here? I heard gamification, right? So they're basically blending the concepts of gamification with augmented reality. And I think, although tangential to this current conversation, that's going to be a large part of what we do in the future as it relates to AR. So a simple definition then is we're embedding or superimposing the physical environment with information that we see and interact with through our smartphone. Again, more than likely it'll jump to the glasses with some sort of heads-up display and potentially the lenses, although that's way beyond my expertise. David Pogue, who writes a review column in the New York Times for technology, recently wrote in Scientific American that the phone becomes a magic looking glass. And I think that's a useful metaphor, because in a lot of ways that's what your phone becomes. It's a way to see things in the physical environment that are otherwise not there. So how is this possible? Right now we've got two forms of augmented reality emerging. The first of which is location-based, which is basically leveraging GPS and compass technologies. As the users walk around a physical environment, such as Radford University's campus, they will encounter hotspots or areas within the campus that have media embedded that show them and teach them about that physical environment. The other technology that we're leveraging is actually coming out of Qualcomm's labs, and it's vision-based augmented reality. They've developed a software developers kit, or SDK, called Vuforia, which actually enables people to develop experiences where you point your video camera at a two-dimensional image, such as a sign at the zoo, and it'll actually trigger a three-dimensional model on your phone, or for that matter, any media. So those are the two major forms of AR, and there's a wide range of uses that we can look at, from education, which is what we're focused on here, to tourism, gaming, as you saw in Roku's Reward, and then other applications such as military training, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. So Chris and I recently had an opportunity to review the literature, specifically looking at K-12 and K-20 applications, and certain patterns emerged from the literature in terms of affordances and limitations. The first of which is, by virtue of the fact that it's a ubiquitous environment, it's a one-to-one environment, we have the ability to present complementary yet incomplete pieces of a problem space. So you, sir, could be on a team with Denise And this gentleman and all three of you would only see a piece of the problem space that you would then have to jigsaw together in order to successfully navigate. And we know that's a relatively authentic practice within science and other fields, where experts come to the field with various areas of expertise that they must combine together. We also see the affordance that it basically turns the physical environment into another layer of content that you need to manipulate and work through. With those affordances, we have limitations. There's a high level of complexity involved with some of these implementations, and we're seeing a certain amount of cognitive overload with the students. You've got the device, you've got the inquiry, you've got the collaborative problem solving. It takes a fair amount of management, and the same technologies which enable it to occur, i.e. GPS and vision-based, also present certain limitations, such as fidelity of GPS, jitter and lag, the accuracy of a certain data point being at a certain location where you want it to trigger. So we also wanted to study how can we turn the development process over to the larger community. Because right now it's been relatively isolated to software engineers, programmers, and while there's approximately 30 platforms out there that enable you to create AR in one form or fashion, there's only a handful that don't require programming skills, that don't require coding. And the four that are most appropriate for education and training uses are the following. ARIS, which is coming out of University of Wisconsin in Madison, led by Kurt Squire's team and David Gagnon. Tailblazer, which is coming out of MIT. Seven Scenes, which is a platform coming out of Amsterdam. And then finally, Fresh Air, which is the platform that we developed at Radford University. So let's take a deeper look at Fresh Air. Basically, what we did is we built a web-based editor that enables anyone without any programming skills to create their own augmented reality, mainly location-based, but soon to be vision-based, and then deploy it to a smartphone. In this case, an Apple phone, iOS device, or a Google-based phone, Android-based phone. So it works on both of those smartphone platforms. As you can see here, we do have a website that's going up soon, and you can find more information at playfreshair.com. So we wanted to build on top of an interface that people were already familiar. Everyone or most people are very familiar with Google Maps. We literally built our system on top of the API. And so you can go into the Fresh Air editor, find a location, lay down some hotspots, and then immediately embed those with media. That media can be images, text, YouTube videos, assessments such as multiple choice and fill in the blank, as well as three-dimensional models which tap into the Vuforia technology I've already mentioned. In addition to those basic media that we can embed, we also have the ability to do role-based differentiation. So again, you can build in jigsaw pedagogy to a certain extent. We also have dynamic gameplay built into where, depending upon player input on the device and player physical movement, we can actually have different events cascade in front of the player, much like a video game would. So once it's developed in the editor, you immediately deploy it, and it's live online through a smartphone. So we actually built this through a National Science Foundation grant, through a DRK-12 grant. It took us approximately 3 years to develop. We disclosed intellectual property to RU and the National Science Foundation, and now we're moving forward with a commercial venture. We had the great opportunity to reconnect with the Harvard team through Qualcomm's Wireless Reach project, and they were able to supply some funding that enabled us to embed their Vuforia technology within Fresh Air. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry Metcalf, who's going to tell you all about their exciting EcoMobile project.
Thank you. When I test to stop the video, let me know, okay?
To stop it, use.
Here we go. Hi, so I'm Sherry Metcalf. I'm the project co-director of EcoMobile at Harvard University. Amy Kamarainen is my co-director. Chris Dede, who you've already met, is the principal investigator for the project, and Dr. Tina Grotzer is the co-PI. She's also on the faculty in the Graduate School of Education. So that's our team. EcoMobile is a research grant funded also by the National Science Foundation and by a grant from Qualcomm's Wireless Reach Initiative. It's ecosystem, it stands for, we came up with an acronym, Mobile Outdoor Blended Immersive Learning Environment. And the idea is that we want to look at how we can help middle school students learn ecosystem science and understand the processes involved in complex ecosystems by combining student experiences in immersive virtual environments and in real ecosystems that are infused with virtual resources. So we're using virtual worlds and also augmented reality. So it builds on the EcoMove project, which is what I was working on with Professor Dede for the last 4 years. As an EcoMove, MOVE stands for Multi-User Virtual Environment. And so it's a virtual world where students explore through a 2-week inquiry-based curriculum where they can explore a virtual ecosystem. This one's a pond, and there's also a forest. They can explore the virtual world, shrink down to microscopic size to see microscopic life forms, and even to see atomic level processes. They explore over space, talk to virtual residents, travel in time, and see processes unfold, collect a variety of data, including population data, water measurements, and weather data, and look at trends over time. And then the students work together as a team to come up with a hypothesis about what's going on in the ecosystem. So that's the EcoMove project. We've been working on that for the last 4 years. It's now completed as a research project, but you're able to download and use the software yourself. Just visit our website. And we wanted to look at how we could then enhance that experience for students by now taking it to the next level of helping students understand real ecosystems during field trips to the real world and making those connections. So I'm going to play this video. How do I do that? Thank you. This is a little different from the video that's been showing.
EcoMobile is a program we've been developing for middle school students that helps them to connect with their learning in the classroom with the real-world experience. So they've been able to work in the classroom in their science class with a multi-user virtual environment where they explore a virtual pond and they act like scientists to collect information about an ecological mystery that's happened at the virtual pond. But then now we've developed EcoMobile to allow the students to take some of the pieces that they're learning about in the classroom and learn more about them in the real world. So we've developed an augmented reality game that the students can play on smartphones using a 3G wireless network at a real pond. So as the students move around the real environment, they encounter hotspots, and at the hotspots there is information that connects with what they were learning in the classroom. Things like what's a producer, a consumer, or a decomposer, or allows them to take measurements of the pond to test its water quality. So the students have been coming out with us to the pond environment and going on field trips and using augmented reality to connect their experiences with the classroom.
Wants to know what is the most common type of organism you observe. Honestly, we've observed a lot of producers.
Because we see a lot of green, and all of these plants and trees are producers.
And they all produce stuff.
Yeah.
The kids have been very excited to use the smartphone devices, and it's amazing to see how quickly they can pick it up and use it to its full capacity. It took a very short introduction for the kids to be able to navigate with the device and to access these hotspots. And they were figuring things out and troubleshooting together. It was really fun to see them work together to solve some of the problems that they were encountering. And you know, one student might not quite understand how something worked, and another student was right there to help them figure it out. Some of the programs they're using and the probes that they're using are very similar to what real scientists use to monitor ecosystems. And so they're getting experiences that rival what real scientists do, and they realize that, and they see things about the water quality and start to understand what this means for
Okay, so I'm going to stop there, but the full video is available on our website, and now you've also been introduced to Amy Kamarainen, who's my co-project director, and she did a great job at describing the project, so my work is done. But what I want to talk about here is how we are specifically incorporating features of the augmented reality and Matt's Fresh Air software into the experiences, and what do we think are the main powerful advantages of using this technology. So as you saw, we're using augmented reality, but we're also having students do data collection and explore the pond. But the features of the augmented reality that I want to highlight here are taking on the scientific roles, individualized pathways, making connections, and seeing the unseen. So we developed a number of different activities over the first year of the grant. We've just completed our first year of EcoMobile. We piloted it in a bunch of classrooms. So I'm going to describe examples from different experiences that we piloted last year. One of those was in the video. Just as in EcoMove, students took on a role when they were exploring the virtual ecosystem. And similarly, in EcoMobile, we can design activities where students select their role, as Matt described, and then they have a differentiated experience based on the role that they are pursuing. So this table here is an example of how we designed activities where each student has a complementary set of activities that they are doing at the pond, collecting data and exploring and learning relevant to their role, and then they come together as a team. I also wanted to point out on this slide that the activities are just that, they're active. In a traditional field trip, which we've gone on a lot of and observed, there's typically the teacher talking, pointing out interesting things, right? And the clump of students is following along, and they're supposed to be paying attention to the teacher, but they're probably whispering with their friends or kicking over piles of leaves or whatever they're doing. By giving each student their own phone and their own instruction and activities to do right there, what we're finding is that the activity becomes much more student-directed and self-paced, and the students are following along and actively engaged in the experience. And pointing out that the activities are also active. They're observing, they're calculating, they're collecting, they're measuring, a lot of action verbs, a lot of things that they're doing. So the phone is leading and structuring the experience, and then they're doing things in the world. We don't want students to spend the whole field trip just looking at a screen, right? The screen is there to lead them and guide them in things that they do, looking around at the world. And along with students taking on their own roles, I wanted to point out, and this is a screen from Fresh Air, as Matt was describing, we design individualized pathways based on the roles. So different students might be visiting hotspots in a different order or visiting different hotspots altogether as they do different activities. I should also point out, because everybody asked, how hard is it? This was at one school in Massachusetts at their local pond that the students were able to walk to. But when we want to implement the experience at a different location, it's very easy for us to then pull up a new map and relocate the hotspots to create a new activity for a new school. The next point I want to make about augmented reality is making connections. So as we described, and here's another example, the hotspot leads them to a location, and then they're asked to do something that involves looking around at the real world and thinking about something. So in this case, asking them to look for any consumers that they see in the world. In the video, you saw the girl saying, well, it's easy to see producers, and they're learning these scientific concepts, right? The plants are everywhere, but it's a little harder to spot a consumer. And then on the next screen, they're able to type in a description of what consumer they were able to find, maybe a bird or a bug. And as well, we want students to make connections between the field trip and back in the classroom, because you can only really go on one field trip, maybe two if you're lucky. You know, you can't do that much, but you want to extend the learning beyond the field trip itself. So another thing that we had students doing on the phones, because phones are also cameras and recording devices, is to take pictures of organisms or things that they saw in the world. And then back in the classroom, we're able to put those all into Google Earth and map them. We're using a software that tags photos with GPS locations, and then students can share, in this case, the dead snake that the student found and took a picture of with his classmates back in the classroom. And then all the data collection that they're doing in the field also, taking water measurements, dissolved oxygen, temperature, turbidity at different locations, all of that is also brought back in the classroom and shared as part of a discussion about how can we assess the health of this stream or pond, or what accounts for variation in temperature or turbidity or whatever readings that we've collected. Or how does this compare with what the students who did the activity last week or last year, the data that they collected, what can we do? So getting students to stop thinking about an ecosystem as a snapshot and thinking of it as a process over time. And finally, the other powerful advantage of augmented reality that we found is helping students see the unseen. So, for example, we might have a prompt about making sure students understand the processes by which oxygen gets into the water. And based on their answer, maybe if we decide that they need more review, we have an animated video that can play right there to illustrate how oxygen gets into the water by being blown in by the wind and also through the process of photosynthesis. And so before students collect dissolved oxygen, because they have their probe in hand, maybe they work in a pair and one student's carrying the probes and one student's carrying the phone, and they take turns and they're supposed to collect. Before they do the collection, we make sure they understand what it is they're collecting and why it's important. And we can provide just-in-time instruction to help them get that understanding if they're a little shaky on it. And then with the vision-based augmented reality that Matt was talking about and using the Vuforia tool, we're able to we place targets in the world, and when students hold their phone up, they're able to see a 3D model or an animated 3D video of the processes of, for example, photosynthesis at the atomic level. And we can set that up at several layers of zoom, so they can look at the bark of a tree and then understand what's going on inside with the water coming up through the roots into the leaves, and then what's happening at the leaf with the process of photosynthesis. And we can narrate that. We can provide text as well, so it's really powerful. So, like I said, we just finished our first year. We piloted a lot of different activities, different levels, all middle school, but different age groups between 6th and 8th. And with 10 teachers and approximately 500 students during the fall and the spring. We're in the Northeast. We don't do this in the winter. And what we found was that teachers reported in post-interview, students seem more self-directed and engaged than on traditional field trips. Students demonstrated deeper understanding than was typical on prior field trips. And the students themselves, I mean, clearly they're more highly engaged. They're very excited about using the phones. I should say, because this has come up a lot, for these activities, we provided the phones for the class to use. So we had already installed the software and provided the phones. It wasn't a bring-your-own device, although that's certainly a possibility in the future. In post-interview, students said they felt they learned more because the experience were interactive and situated. They were more interested because they could make the connection with their own neighborhoods. So a couple of quotes. Excuse me. So here's a teacher saying it helped structure their movement through space. Rather than having a whole group of kids clustered in one muddy, wobbly spot at the edge of the pond, they were all at sort of different spots going through it at their different paces. And because they were moving independently through the different parts, I felt like it gave them a different ownership of the experience than if there had been just one teacher voice and a crowd of kids. And some student quotes saying that they were noticing things they never noticed before, because through the hotspots we were able to bring them to a location and focus their attention at something and asking them to think about it. How did this erosion happen and what's going on here? Students saying, if I had just gone to the stream, I probably wouldn't have even thought of noticing it. And another student saying that it teaches us a little about stuff before we do our data, because it's kind of pointless collecting data not knowing what it is. It teaches us what our data means. I think that's my point. Thank you. So it's interactive, and we can tell what's going on. And again, bringing up that it's in our society and what we do, feeling like it's meaningful because it's personally relevant. So that's the EcoMobile project, as I said, funded by the National Science Foundation and by Qualcomm. And the TI-inspired graphing calculators and vernier probes were provided by Texas Instruments. And for more information, you can visit our website. So I'll pass it back to Matt, who can talk about some other examples.
Did you want to? So we've looked at augmented reality as an overall field. We've taken a deeper look at Fresh Air, one of the tools that enables you to create augmented reality. We've looked specifically at one of the projects that's coming out of Fresh Air, or the tool that's being used to assist EcoMobile. Now let's take a step back and look at some other ways that this could be used, some of which has nothing to do with education. I know most of us are educators and we like to stay in that space. I personally love getting away from education just for a few minutes. So let's look at just pure fun. This is a game called Wolfpack, which has certain childhood health implications in the sense that childhood obesity has tripled since 1983. And one of the reasons why childhood obesity has tripled is diet and exercise, and there's lots of variables there. But augmented reality has the potential, and I say potential, and I say this with a little bit of cynicism, as it's just a possible tool. It has the ability to potentially get kids moving more frequently. So, for example, you could design a game. Has anybody played Zombies Run? Anybody a runner in here? You've heard of Zombies Run? Okay, so it's kind of an audio, some people call it augmented reality, but really it's an audio version of, as you run a mile, you hear an audio track play that says the zombies are getting closer. And then it basically incentivizes you in structures and scaffolds interval training. So you actually have to sprint in order to outrun the zombies. It works. It's not scary, but it's enough. It's enough to where you can buy into it, and I tell you what, it makes running a lot more fun, because running is not fun. So we tried to riff on that idea a little bit, and we said, well, let's build a game called Wolfpack, where here's a scenario. You've crash landed in the Canadian wilderness, and your supplies are strewn across the forest floor, and you have to run to go collect those supplies. The only problem is the woods are full of ravenous wolves, and they're going to eat you. So what we did, and this is actually my neighborhood, and this gets into some of the issues and areas that Sherry touched upon, and I mentioned earlier, is the idea of repurposing the physical environment in order to meet different teaching objectives. So I'm going to show you my neighborhood, and I'm going to show you Wolfpack on top of it, and basically it's timed intervals where you have to leave the plane wreckage, and first you have to go get matches, because if you don't get the matches, you'll freeze to death. Then you got to run back to the plane, and you got to build your fire. Then you got to get your water, because you're dehydrated. Then you got to run back, and finally you get your gun, et cetera, et cetera. And the whole time, you're incentivized to run faster and faster. And you can differentiate it by choosing levels. So if I'm a beginner, perhaps I just want to walk to the water. But if I'm an advanced, perhaps I want to cut the time down to, you got to be there in 15 seconds, or else the wolves are going to eat you. So you get the idea of you can build out and scaffold physical activity to a certain extent. So let's take another game called Spacewalker. Now let's get a little bit back into education. We know that scale and proportion are difficult concepts for students. We also know that especially as it applies to space, it's a very hard concept to grasp. So we're in the process of looking at how AR might be able to facilitate that. And so we're looking at astronomy and scale, and the scenario is you explore the solar system, which has been superimposed on top of your school grounds. And then we scale down the planets. So we're working with WHRO right in Hampton Roads, and I know the Department of Education, and under leadership of Tane McGraw, has been working with that program as well. But basically, here's my neighborhood again, but instead of a frozen Canadian wilderness, now it's a solar system. And if the sun were the size of a basketball, then these would be, and these aren't totally accurate, but these would be the various distances that you would have to run, or walk in this case, to the various planets. Now obviously this is something that we're just testing out, but the idea is you can play with space and scale and proportion in a way with augmented reality that might bring dividends to some of these traditionally difficult concepts. Let's now take a look at how the military might be able to use this. I had the opportunity to write a white paper for the Army Research Institute, and they were very interested in how mobile technology, specifically augmented reality, could be used to enhance COIN training, counterinsurgency training. And so I brainstormed a little bit, and the idea was, well, you could actually superimpose the base obstacle course or a forward operating base in theater with various linguistic and cultural and combat scenarios that would be presented to the trainee or soldier in the field on their handheld that they would have to walk through while they're being physically taxed through a physical obstacle course and cognitively taxed. So this scenario could be, the Helmand Province sim which is you run through it at the obstacle course with the platoon prior to them being deployed in the Helmand province in Afghanistan. So one of the things that we kind of prototyped out was, well, how would this actually work? And we had an artist basically do a rendition of, you'd have a neoprene sleeve, so you had wet-dry capability, it'd be on their forearm, you could do physical activity, and then at various physical locations, it would vibrate and present a scenario to you where you actually would have to assess threat indicators, make a choice, and if the choice were wrong, in the sim you would die, but you would continue through the simulation, the training exercise. Again, another example of how it might be used. And finally, this ties back into the Wireless Reach project. In addition to the Harvard Graduate School of Education, we've had the opportunity to work with a fantastic team called School in the Park. And it's a charter school out in San Diego, and they actually use the San Diego Zoo, and for the educators in the room, this is like a dream scenario from my perspective. They use the San Diego Zoo and the San Diego History Museum as part of their outdoor classroom, where they actually take the kids into these environments. And what we wanted to explore was, in coordination with Qualcomm, how can we use Vuforia and augmented reality to enhance that experience? And so what we did is we actually superimposed an augmented reality on top of the zoo. Students had to go to 3 exhibits, the burro, the condor, the rattlesnake, and when they got there, they would trigger media that would hopefully drive them deeper into the exhibit, into the experience. Because one thing that I think is a fatal flaw in some ways with AR design is we do not want to replace the environment. If we replace the environment with augmented reality, in my opinion, we failed, right? Because then you're stuck in the machine, and Sherry referenced this earlier. And honestly, it happens more often than not, is the kids actually, because of novelty effects and other variables, they're stuck in the machine while they could be surrounded with this amazing environment. And if that's the case, then we, as designers, we've made a mistake. So the idea is actually drive them deeper into the environment and drive them deeper into social interactions with each other by virtue of this tool. What that ratio is, I have no idea. But in my opinion, if the kids are looking at the screen more than 20 to 30%, then I think we're starting to fail. In other words, it should be look at the machine, but really interact with your environment, interact with each other more so than the machine. So here's an example, and Sherry referenced this, but what we did is, again, in coordination with Qualcomm's team, we built a series of 3-dimensional models. So they get to the Condor exhibit, and you can see this student right here is pointing her video camera at the sign. We actually had little signs printed out, and when they did that, a 3-dimensional model will be triggered. When they were 2 feet away from the sign, the model would show the condor in its habitat, flying from a branch onto a carcass. If they moved in to approximately 16 inches, that 3D model would then change into a close-up of the condor's head, stripping meat off of the bone. So again, and this gets to seeing the unseen. Some of these things we would be able to see in the exhibit, some of them they wouldn't. If they go into the 8-inch proximity, it actually strips away, it's an anatomical cutaway of the condor's head, showing the anatomical features and the adaptations that the animal has per its diet, which was the teaching objective. Now this is a perfect example of seeing the unseen. Students would not be able to see that, right? They'd be able to see the bird in the exhibit, but they wouldn't necessarily be able to take an anatomical cutaway of that bird in real time. And to me, that's a value added. So those are 4 quick examples, but honestly, we're just beginning. Yes, ma'am. School in the Park is online. We are just beginning with this. Some of us are relatively expert in the field, but I'll speak for myself only. We have no idea where this could go, but we do know it'll be part of our toolkit. We do know it'll be mobile, social, and networked and augmented in some form or fashion, but it's just one of many possible tools. But how we use it is a complete question mark. And it's really up to us as a community to figure that out. And that's one of the reasons why we developed Fresh Air. So we could put it out into the hands of the community, and you develop what you see as good pedagogical techniques, what you see as good experiences. If you want more information, that's Sherry's information here. And I encourage you to check out the EcoMobile project, which is it's very impressive and it's very important work. If you want to contact me, there's my email. And if you want to check out Fresh Air, we are on the App Store and Google Play, but we haven't publicly released it yet because we want to bundle a few experiences. but that will probably be within days. So if you're interested, please talk to one of us or contact us.
So Matt, Sherry, thanks for a terrific overview. I'm going to say just a few quick things, and then I'm going to throw it open to you to interact with us. So let me tie this to other parts of the conference. In her talk this morning, Peggy from Qualcomm talked about the sixth sense and the idea that the real world is confusing and it's complicated, and we've always told students, if you want to learn about the world, get away from the world. Go to the forum with Socrates, go to the classroom, and learn about the world through interpretation and reflection when it's not right in your face. And that's true. It's powerful to do that. But it's also powerful when you're in the world, as Peggy said, to have a device that knows who you are, how you like to learn, where you are, what around you is augmented for learning, who you like to learn with, and how to reach them. So that's the life-wide complement to the classroom. Second point is that in the opening remarks, I talked a little bit about scale. And it's interesting to contrast how we're scaling up EcoMove, the virtual world, and how we plan to scale up EcoMobile, the augmented reality. EcoMove, we finished a curriculum based on EcoMove. It's been released through a free license from Harvard. So when you come to the EcoMove website, you can sign up. You can download the virtual ecosystems, a teacher's guide, associated curricular materials, a little bit of professional development, and you can just run with EcoMove and use it. It's a very simple method of scaling all across the world. Now, we can't do that with EcoMobile because the augmented realities are local. So if we want to scale EcoMobile, we have to do something quite different, which is to create some kind of template, as Sherry described, where we've shown what can be done with a water-based ecosystem. And then whether you have a pond or whether you have a marsh or whether you have a drainage ditch that's within walking distance of your school, you can use the template and tools like Fresh Air, and in about an hour, you can create that local augmented reality that then you tie to the curriculum. We think within a year we'll be releasing templates like that for teachers. But we also think that tools like Fresh Air are going to advance to the extent that within a couple years we'll be releasing them for students. And EcoMove provides a very powerful learning experience because you're in a virtual world and you have all these experiences that you might not have access to in the real world, and they're customized to learn from them. Augmented reality does that, but it does something more. It lets you design. And we know that the best way to learn something is to teach it. And so if you're designing a learning experience for your best friend about your backyard as an ecosystem, or your neighborhood as a history, or your mall as an economics lesson, then you're really getting down into very deep learning. So we're excited about that as a possibility. Now, one of the things that's happening at Harvard is people are very excited about these massively open online courses, these MOOCs. And they're thinking, well, look at the impact we can have in not just in Harvard, but all across the developing world, all across the world, where hundreds of thousands of students can take this course, and they won't have instructional support, but they'll have other kinds of supports that can really help them learn. And that is exciting, although we don't know yet quite how to design those experiences and what proportion of people are going to be able to learn successfully from them. But I am certain in the developing world that is not going to be enough. And I'm also certain that the developing world is not going to go through some kind of educational model where there's a school every couple miles and a university every 20, 30 miles. That's not going to happen. So augmented reality is a very big, interesting question mark there, because if we were to augment the developing world, and by we, I really mean they, and then we complement that with these MOOC-like environments. Is that a 21st century educational system, or a big piece of a 21st century educational system? The answer to that question is going to have an enormous impact on the future of civilization one way or the other. So it's really a very exciting time to be involved with this. So let me just close by saying that, as Matt said and as Sherry said, this is an area right now where the primary limit is creativity. It's not technical. It's not economic, it's not political. It is to some extent cultural and psychological, because we have to be willing to get out into this space, which is unfamiliar, and take risks and sort out what works and what doesn't. But the most profound barrier is just creativity, and kids are going to teach us a lot about how to augment reality, but we can model for them some very creative approaches, as Matt and Sherry and the other people working in this space have done. So with that, let me throw it open. Questions, comments for anybody? Please, go ahead.
Good morning. Charles Randolph from Arlington Public Schools. Question, with the AR moving up so much, what is your future concept or thinking of mobile devices, creating AR on mobile devices? I know with my school system, we're going more with mobile devices, and I'm really want to lean away from getting away from laptops or PCs and doing everything on the mobile device. What's your time frame on the experts to see when you think that may come up?
I mean, the honest answer is I have no idea. We're running into limitations with, because we've tried to look at the iPad as a platform for development. And so there's lots of really great apps out there that enable you to geotag stuff in the field with your smartphone. And so there are apps that allow you to do a certain amount of location-based type of learning activities. But what we tried to do was look and say, okay, can we have, and Harvard's looked at this as well, can we have students walk through an experience, and while they're doing that, actually co-create the experience, collect data, augment, and make notes in the environment that other students that are right behind them in real time perhaps could pick up and actually use for their learning experience. We're running into technical limitations on our end and Fresh Air's end in doing that. But in terms of predicting when that's going to happen, I don't know. But it will happen. It's already happening to a certain extent with other platforms, but we are not currently doing that. I don't see, I mean, whether it's something like comparable to a MacBook Air, I definitely am seeing the need for some sort of laptop device for the development in the near future, at least with the platforms that I'm familiar with. But that may not be the case in the future with new technologies evolving. And I know that's not a certain answer, but I'm being totally honest. I don't have an idea of when that might come.
Hi, I'm Aaron Sterling from Fairfax County Public Schools. What kind of data are we getting back in order for those people that are going to look at this and say, yeah, okay, the kids were engaged, they thought they learned more? Give me the evidence. Show me that they learned more. What kind of data are we collecting about that?
I can make a real quick statement and throw it to Sherry on that. I mean, we obviously need causal findings. We don't have those. Our team, the Radford Outdoor Augmented Reality team, we focus primarily on qualitative case studies. We focused on developing the software itself, design-based research, iterative prototyping to a certain extent, where we went out and interviewed and observed. But you're exactly right, especially with the political climate, and we need it. We need to justify the use of this tool, in my opinion, with obvious causal findings with enhanced learning on whatever outcomes we deem as being important. Right now, that's standardized tests. Now, there's a good debate to be had whether or not that's the best outcome measure, but it is what we're currently working with. So I know Harvard's done a fair amount of work in this, and I'll throw it to Sherry, but we do not have causal findings on the efficacy of this tool yet, but that is, in my opinion, the next step, because really, 5 years ago when we were working on this, we were like, well, that's coming, but let's not put the cart before the horse. We got to actually develop it. We got to develop the intervention before we can actually put it out there and test it and test efficacy. I think, in my opinion, we're there now. We have an intervention that's robust enough and complete enough to we can start doing some of the testing that you're implying. And I think Sherry's team may have already started doing some of that. Maybe.
Well, that's right. As an emerging technology, first you have to figure out what you're designing and what you think is going to work, and then measuring whether it does that or not. So we have some data from EcoMove the virtual environment about that shows definite learning gains in content knowledge, also in causal understanding of those complex processes, and in affective measures like students' self-efficacy and belief that they can do science, and that's really powerful as well. So for EcoMobile, as I said, we're in the first year of the 4-year grant, and as a research grant, that's one of the things we're doing. So right now we're still trying to refine all the activities and figure out our specific learning goals and come down to a specific design. But we're developing also robust measures of content understanding, causal understanding, and we're also going to measure students' understanding of inquiry, because we're really an inquiry-based curriculum, and we want to measure students understanding the skills that they need in order to do scientific inquiry, collecting data and analyzing what that data means. And so we have some really exciting measures for that as well. So stay tuned a couple years and we should have more.
Over here.
I'm Brenda Bannon from George Mason University, and I think part of the issue is getting these kinds of tools that allow, kind of editor-based tools that allow you not to be a programmer, into the hands of educators and researchers. So I applaud your efforts towards that. I've looked for Fresh Air on the App Store. I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, it's successfully submitted and approved, and we're not releasing it until we have we're going to bundle some experiences with it so that when you download it, you can actually play Wolfpack, for example, in your neighborhood. So that, because part of what we're facing as an emerging technology, and this is academic as well as just commercial, we have to educate the populace to a certain extent. What is AR? Well, if you download an AR development kit or authoring tool, and there's no contextualized example of what you could do with it, you've got a really fancy tool that early adopters might kick around and mod, but most people will not. So it's an intellectually interesting question, but commercially it's a non-starter. So what we're waiting, it'll probably be 3 to 4 days before we're actually going to say, okay, here it is, and then you'll be able to download it and play with it.
And are you looking for partnerships in relation to some of that research and use and getting feedback from educators who try out your tool?
Absolutely, absolutely. And both from the academic side of the house, which is what I'm representing today as a professor at Radford University, but also in the commercial venture. I mean, for me, it's a personal and professional thrill to watch the Harvard team and the School in the Park team take a tool that we worked on for about 3 years behind closed doors and said, is this going to be worth a darn? And then we put it out there, and really talented people are taking it and doing things that we had never imagined. So just a personal anecdote, I'm thrilled with that. So absolutely we are interested in everyone looking at it and giving us very critical feedback. What's working, what's not? How could this enhance education, and how actually is it presenting challenges?
Right.
Over here.
Thanks. This is a great presentation. I'm a web developer and work as an education technology consultant sometimes. And I thought it was really interesting. I'm wondering, I have 3 questions, so maybe I'll ask you some of them afterwards. But will the Fresh Air platform hook into audio or anything like that, so you could talk to people who weren't next to you?
So kind of device-to-device, player-to-player communication?
Yeah, exactly.
It's on our development list, but honestly not as high a priority right now. With real-time interaction, because you can think about, there's a couple different things, and I don't want to go too deep into it, but yes, we are thinking about doing that, because then it would get really interesting where the actual game changes as the players play it in real time, and they can communicate with each other and share items. And I don't want to plug another platform over Fresh Air necessarily, but Eris is an outstanding platform that allows you to do some of that real-time trading right now, and that's online. I pushed the URL earlier. So these different tools all do some of the core functionality the same way, but some of them, such as Eris and Fresh Air, they do certain things differently. And if you're interested in real-time trading and dynamics in that way, I would look at Eris in addition to Fresh Air. And Tailblazer. They're all great devices and platforms.
Cool. And then my non-technical question is more on the side. The entire time you guys were talking, I was just thinking of Minecraft. Like, there are kids who are just love a sandbox and love to go play with that. How have you guys, I know you mentioned you're thinking about doing that. Where is that? How are you guys thinking about implementing that? Like, I just imagine kids would love to go in their backyard and build that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things we're trying to bundle with Fresh Air is examples, and Chris mentioned templates, so that people can download it and immediately just repopulate it with their stuff. and immediately play a real quick mini game. In addition to some of the modding features that you're referencing with Minecraft and things like that. So there's a huge population out there that I think would be very interested in that. Jim G calls them affinity groups in some contexts. And I think that's going to be a big part of who creates the next gen of this stuff.
Okay, so we need to wrap up. Yes, in fact, we need to wrap up. Thank you. Time goes fast when you're having fun. I just feel of all the emerging technologies I work with, this has the biggest upside potential, but it's also in its infancy. I mean, mobile learning has become an adolescent, but this is still in its infancy, and you're sort of vulnerable when you're in your infancy. So we hope to get as many people into the water as possible. We hope that you will grab some augmented reality tools and join us in trying things and studying things and seeing what comes out of them. And we hope that maybe at next year's conference we'll have a broader panel that can share some very interesting directions that this is taking. So with that, please be sure to let us hear from you. And what comes next is not a networking break. We are not having a 15-minute networking break. Instead, I want you to imagine the zombie situation where you need to get back to the other room as quickly as you can so that Julie and I can close. Thank you.